Well, hello. I've never been to Zurich before, and I love my technology. And I look at people who love their technology. I've always got things like my mobile phone on me, so if you wouldn't mind, can I do a selfie? Thank you. That's going to go up on my Facebook page, if you don't mind. So, I'm from the University of Portsmouth, and I've been studying how people engage with technology in a sexual way for about 30 years or more. I know I don't look that old, really. And what I've discovered is that as our technology is changing and developing, so is our relationship to it and with it. So I've found that maybe we're looking at different ways of developing our sexual strategies. Maybe we're looking at ideas of the datification of pleasure and all the implications that that has. And also the idea of ethics and maybe robot rights. But also, I know it sounds odd, but it's interesting, but also the way people engage with their technologies, the way they attach themselves to technologies. So let's hope all this works.
Close your eyes. Close your eyes.
That's quite saucy. It's a piece of technology. There's not a real person in there. But what we do is we put a kind of transference onto that technology to make it appear more human. And the way we engage with robotics, maybe we can accept robots if they are more human, or maybe they should be more abstract. I'm coming up with all these different questions because there's no kind of finite way of looking at how we are addicted to our technology. So very briefly, I'll tell you how I got to do this, because that's one of the main questions I get asked is, how on earth did you get engaged with this kind of strange thing? So basically, I started off, well, I am an artist first and foremost, and I used to do fairly traditional painting, you know, nudes and going into different situations where I would be an artist in residence. And I spent a while as artist in residence with a big power station. And the only way I could work out what the heck I was drawing was to turn it in my mind into a human being, because I like doing life drawing. And then I thought, wow, if I've got really into this idea of, you know, the technology of the power station as being the lungs and the blood and the piping and the technology there, then why don't I look at the body as a piece of technology itself? So I ended up drawing cadavers, doing cadaver studies at Southampton University Morphology Laboratories. And then I decided to run away to art school in London, where I came across virtual reality for the first time in about 1990, 91. And I thought, wouldn't it be fantastic to take ideas of the body, put on all this paraphernalia of virtual reality, and project our sexual identity into virtual space? And in 1990, 91, people thought I was absolutely crazy. But that's what I did. And you'll see here some of the pictures of some of the very first sort of virtual sex-themed environments. I did it with a company called Virtual, and what we did was we gamified the idea of sex by catching a flying condom that spoke to you. You ever have had a condom speaking to you? And then you had to put it on the world's first virtual stiffy there. And once you did that, you managed to get into the orgasmatron effect, which was basically flashing lights, sense of 3D space, and me making moaning noises. But it was the first of its kind, and people really took to it, and the people that took to it were the fetishists. You know, the UK has some interesting predilections. So my VR worlds were shown in fetish clubs, Skin 2, all those kind of places. People like Lee Barry looked at it. People from different TV shows thought, oh, this is interesting. We started making things like sex suits because I wanted to link up the virtual space with a haptic body. And there were some other guys who did that too. Kurt Wolford and Carl Stensley, they actually produced a body connection over the internet. So I ended up thinking, right, we've got an invention here, we've got inventiveness here, we've got people who have got a passion for their fetish, for their technology. So I was lucky enough to do a PhD where I found an underground of people who were passionate about their technology and passionate about their sexuality, passionate about their sexual fetishism. And what they did was they combined all these things together. And this is over 20 years ago now. There's a group of fetishists who would go on the very early days of the internet and they would buy all these crazy pieces of medical equipment and connect it up to their bodies, and they built their own server and invited a select number of people onto their server and stimulated each other's bodies. And this was an event that I was invited to watch. And this person here, when he was involved in this environment, in his head, in his connections to the virtual space, he became Stephanie. So we started looking at ideas of gender transition. What happens to ideas of gender in the body? It is performative, but what else happens? And what if these guys liked being in this situation so much they didn't want to get out of it? What about being addicted to these kind of experiences? Let's see what's next. So, J.G. Ballard said, sex times technology equals the future. We see sex as procreative, relational, recreational, and technology as communication, innovation that includes robotics. So what's happening now is you don't have to have sex to have babies anymore. It now becomes sextainment, something you can get into, something you can buy into. And we're so used to a whole cultural history of our love of technology and our engagement with technology. Things like, I don't know if you remember the film Barbarella with Jane Fonda. They have sex by taking a tablet and just touching their fingers. Taking a tablet. Bit of an addiction thing going on there. And of course, we've got these wonderful robots going, danger, danger, let's rescue the lady. And then, of course, we've got classic Star Trek with Data kissing the sexy cyborg woman, sexy Borg woman. Two robots having sex. What's that all about? What would be the point of a robot orgasm? Would they have one? Would they fake it? So we're looking at future visions of sex and pleasure, but it's combined with technology. And the way that our technology is now so embedded in our lives, our very lives, we are addicted to it. But it's kind of scary when you think about sex dolls and sex robots. So I'm going to show you just a brief clip of this video. So if you can show this, and I'll wave when to stop it. And I think you'll understand why when you see the footage. So here we see a delivery of a sex doll, sex robot.
So, wollte ich den mal abmachen hier. Leider gibt es Fernsehen noch nicht mit Geruch. Das riecht nämlich so wie die Lieferung damals.
She's got socks on. She's going to have cold feet.
Die Kiste erinnert auch daran.
Is this sinister? Okay, can we stop this video now, please? So when we start seeing that mirrors ourselves, that idea of the uncanny valley, we have that moment where we're going, ooh, that's not quite right, or, oh, this is really interesting, I want to see more. And that kind of element that disgusts us also excites us. There are elements as well of ideas of the robot, the sex robot, overtaking our jobs. There's a link here if anybody wants to have a look at it at some point. There was a brothel made with sex dolls. They're about, I don't know, 60 euros a go. And a lot of prostitutes and their brothels, sex workers, they complained about it. It was taking their jobs. I wouldn't have liked to have been the cleaner, though. So are we thinking in terms of a different form of sexual strategy because of our addiction and our relation to technology and robots, and even things like our simple mobile phone? Now, I'm wondering, because we like to buy our gadgets, we're fetishistic about our gadgets, we're addicted to our gadgets, that we're going to see, if it's linked up with ideas like Facebook, social media, that we're going to see what I call massive open haptic online orgies. Can we cue that video if we can, please? You can now have this in your own living room. You can link up with lots of other people with it if you want to. It's just another option of our sextainment. Of course, we've already seen a little bit about her. We're used to now more contemporary versions of the robot and the artificial human. There's some classic films here like Ex Machina. There's, of course, the TV series Humans. And there's, of course, the quite interesting one, Lars and the Real Girl. Because we've got an overlapping and a kind of fantastical confusion between sex dolls and robots, because they're both quite different things, really. What's going to be interesting is when we start seeing elements of artificial intelligence being brought in to our relationships as part of our addictive process with different technologies. So is that going to be another ethical dilemma? Will that be something that we need to think about in terms of our own rights with our relationship with our technology? Addiction is, of course, reward and reinforcement. When you've got, say, your sex doll that tells you you're doing everything right all the time, that's your reward and you're reinforced. You've got the idea of sex addiction, which has become quite prevalent in various psychological and sexological realms. If you think about all these things and you combine them together with virtual reality and now augmented reality, and of course with your mobile phones, your robots and avatars, body augmentation. Imagine you've got a tattoo and you can put your mobile phone over it and your augmented reality tattoo jumps up and talks to you. Could this be seen as a deviant form of innovation, or is this a way of actually finding a key to different forms of creative activity creation? Could addiction be a way of, when we're engaging with these technologies, a way of actually developing different forms of innovative approaches? So, of course, we've got things like Nintendo Love Plus, which is an augmented reality girlfriend. She's on your phone, and you can be in an environment, and you can put your phone up, and she pops up. And, of course, you get the reward and reinforcement because she does everything you ask her to. So where does that put ideas of choice? And of course, a lot of people think that, oh, it's just men that do this stuff. Men are the fetishists, men are the more addictive types with their passion for their tech and all the rest of it. But that's not necessarily the case. What happens to ideas of human-to-human relationships and all this stuff starts happening? You know, you've got, Robert Palmer, who did the song Addictive to Love in the 80s, you know, with all the girls in the back playing the guitars. We have a young lady here who has created a robot, and she wants the right to marry him. She's very happy with him. She's very attached to him. And she'd like to marry him. Does the robot have a choice? Does he look in love with her? But how do we create that? If we're going to be doing artificial intelligence, if we're going to be creating these new alternative versions of ourselves, how would we know what's human, what's robot? Because what could be coming is biotechnology. Robots per se will be these machines that do the heavy jobs. But you'll probably end up with biotechnological semi-people, semi-DNA changes, person, strange, alternative versions of people. What kind of future is actually coming? And will we all end up being kind of cyborgs and partially artificial? So let's just go back to thinking in terms of people having fun with their kit, being passionate about their collections. And we've got a whole rigmarole here of different types of, some people could call it deviant leisure. We've got Roxy, the sex doll that kind of sits there and goes, and not very much else. We've got things like the Tesla suit, which you can do computer gaming with, and you can get shot, and you can feel it. Ow! We've got sex dolls that are male. We've got the Kissinger. You could actually be able to kiss someone through your mobile phone, and you can feel it. I don't like those big slobbery kisses, though. And the other one that really kills me, creases me up, is an owner hole owner hole that is attached to your iPad. So you can sit on the tube, on the train, and nobody would know. Looking at your little bit of porn. If you're that addicted to sex, you're addicted to your iPad, that could be your ideal Christmas present. So, I've got another few more minutes. I just want to get you thinking about one or two things, because there's a lot of hype about the idea of how we can connect with robots and exactly what's available and what is going to happen to all this stuff that we're engaging with on a constant level of reinforcement all the time. And what is that going to do for our privacy? So first of all, I just want to show you a little video, if we can. Show the next video, please. Now, apparently this one has responses.
I love for you, always, all the time. I love this. Nice and gentle. Now then, what's next?
That's as far as kind of your artificial intelligence stuff is going at the moment. But actually, I don't think that's really particularly artificially intelligent. It reminds me of when I was a kid, I had a big teddy bear, and when I leant it forward, it used to go, like that. Same thing. Same thing. So there's lots of hype, but there are some people, like the guys who I knew over 20 years ago, busily making stuff in their bedrooms, in their garage to connect themselves up to because they wanted that sensation, they wanted that reward, they loved their fetish, they loved the gizmos and the gadgets and creating things. There are bound to be people somewhere, somehow, making some sophisticated software. I mean, when you think of actually the artificial intelligence software that's going to be coming to your bank, so when you phone up, you won't be speaking to a person, you'll be speaking to a chatbot. When you take that another step and you start putting it into toys, into sex dolls, I think we're going to see a whole new range, a whole new vista of how we engage with ourselves. And I think at the moment, the way all the political situation is worldwide, I think we need to reassess the idea of the rise of the robots at the moment is no surprise, particularly in the context that we're living in at the moment. But also, if you think of all the gadgets that are now connected in the Internet of Things, what about just simple things like our homegrown vibrator that we all like to use on a Saturday night? Things like that. You get really high-tech ones now that glow, that speak to you, that vibrate in all different types. Can we have the link up, please, if it's available? Now then, we're seeing the datafication of pleasure here, because what's happening is we have a company that made all these wonderful vibrators and dildos and things, but what they didn't tell the customers when they bought them was that they were collecting the data from these vibrators. So, how often you use it? What is your vibrational frequency? All those things are now recordable and sellable. So I just want to leave you with this thought. If all these things are recordable, and if we're going into virtual reality worlds, if I had an amazing haptic virtual reality sexual experience with Johnny Depp in virtual space, and I recorded all my orgasmic frequencies, I could leave it in posterity, in my will, for my relatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your explanation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was very, very interesting. And I saw there a lot of people with open mouths, and they're stunning. I have a question. In a famous Netflix documentary about minimalism, one quote is, "Love people, use things." Mm-hmm. The opposite never works. Do you also see it that way?
I think we've got a division and we have an alternative, another type of choice. And I think at the moment, the way that everything is so instantly accessible with things like the Internet of Things, with being online, all those kind of things, I think things like that are not going to be so clear-cut anymore. And particularly if you say you could program, say you have a programmed robot dog, you could program that to love you back, in a sense. Depends how you identify love. So I think it'd be really interesting to see how that develops, but I think it will be another form of engaging with, I don't know, capitalism as well, because you end up buying all this stuff too.
Okay. So we had an internal discussion about child robots. So is it the solution for a problem that we have called pedophilia?
Yeah, I always get asked this one. It's a very tricky question because it opens a whole can of worms. Particularly at the moment, having a robot sex, or having a sex doll as a child sex doll is illegal. And you need to think particularly in terms of what the cultural contexts are, because in, say, Japan, there's quite an idea of dealing with a younger person in a different context. I think the other thing is paedophilia is about power and sexual violence, and I think that is something that's quite different when you're dealing with the idea of a doll in that context. So I think if it's in a clinical situation, I think that's something different yet again, but I think there's lots of options here, but I think it's such a difficult problem to deal with, and I think it will take, I don't know how many different solutions we need to find, and maybe robot dolls might be part of that, but it might also be part of that which it is not. Okay.
Another question. Will we have to secure the rights to our physical appearance?
I'm actually, I think, well, many years ago, about 1992, 93, I perceived that this would be the case. And I think definitely so that we become our own brand, basically. And also we are identified now through all our different clicks that we make, and that we get our specific advertisements aimed at us, so we're already being branded. And I think we will actually eventually have to brand ourselves and actually get that right to own that identity.
Okay. Yeah, and now some questions from the audience, please.
Be brave.
Stuck in shame.
We're all friends here.
Yes. No questions?
Yeah, we have one young lady.
Hi.
Hi.
I just ask myself, why? Like, is the aim to replace the human being, or why? Why would you build sex robots?
I think it's, why do people go on fairground rides to terrify themselves? Why not? Why not try? If you can, why not? If you don't experiment in these ways, how are you going to create new things? How are you going to suddenly come across something by accident, by engaging in this stuff and making things? And that's why I say that in order to have new forms of innovation, you need to kind of deviate things a bit. So I think it's part and parcel of a creative process that we're all engaged in, whether we find it tasteful or not. But we're always constantly learning about ourselves because we're all constantly changing. So I would say, let's see what happens with it. It's just, I know that you think some people, oh gosh, they're nerds, they can't socialize with real people, they have to have these dolls. Maybe for some of them that is the case. But I think, think of the guys who are employed making these things, and they're, making all the different molds, and they're creating all these different things that could be used for prosthesis for people with disabilities. A friend of mine at Goldsmiths University held a Sextech hackathon, and they came up with some absolutely brilliant ideas of engaging technology and sexual arousal and ideas of sexual exposure. And it was absolutely brilliant. So it is a form of being creative, for sure.
More questions, please? Yeah.
Hello. Do you think this whole sex doll thing is kind of scalable in the future? So will we rather tend to have sex dolls in the future and buy them off of Amazon, or is that for people that are very interested and very open for these kind of things?
It depends, because when I was involved in all the fetish scene and the people that were looking at my work there, they liked the secrecy of those kind of spaces and going to their little fetish shops to buy their rubber dresses and all this stuff. It made it even more sort of naughty and more kind of dangerous. So I think if you've got something like these sex dolls suddenly being available on Amazon, I think that might lose the edge for some fetishists. Who knows? But that may be some way of looking at it. But I think eventually, because fetishism and stuff now is fairly open on all the different media platforms now anyway. And I think that could actually be partially the death of some of the fetish clubs in London, to be honest, because some of them have actually died out. But could that be another PhD? Right, thank you for that. But I think, that there are these elements where people like the naughtiness, or they know that some people will give them more attention because they are buying these dolls. I think it depends. If you wanted to get a sex doll and surprise your friend who's having a stag night because they're getting married and say, here you go. You could have those kind of dolls available on Amazon. It wouldn't surprise me. I think it depends how the market goes, and when there's money, it will all go.
Yeah, over there. Last questions from the audience.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, because I feel like these dolls and the augmented girlfriends, they're always happy with whatever you do, and so isn't sex also part of it is about validation or ratification? So I was wondering, is there development in maybe sex dolls that it's harder to please them, or I don't know, you have to some way work for it, I don't know, to get validation out of it?
Yeah, I think we should go into business with that one. No, I think there are various things going on with the responses that are programmed into these big dolls. I think it depends. You need to have a social context for that behaviour to actually happen. So you'd have to, I would think, in order for the AI and the doll to give you that kind of validation, like, no, you've got to take me out for dinner sort of thing, I think you need that in a wider social context. Because I'm quite interested in those kind of metallic robots that you could take into a garage and repair, but the kind of robots and dolls we're talking about, you'd like to take out to dinner, even though they won't eat anything, so it's a cheap date.
Okay, Trudy Barber, one last question. How would you design your perfect partner? Is it more like a Clooney style, or is it a Zuckerberg style?
Ooh, my perfect partner. Ooh, if Ed's watching this, because I wanted a man who liked motorbikes and played the guitar, and I wished for that. I wanted a big manly man, and now I've got a 6'2" guitarist who's at home at the moment with my budgies watching me. So if you're watching this, hello Ed. I would like maybe. Oh,
It's not that easy.
It's difficult, isn't it? I'd like one that had a lot of money and could look after me in my retirement.
Okay, thank you very much, Trudy Barber.
Thank you.
And now it's tea time. It's tea time now. Yeah, it's tea time.
Thank
Ja,
you.
meine Damen und Herren.